Morning. I'm Brian Quartel. I've been with Home Depot about 23 years, various different organizations. My current role is Director of Financial Operations. Basically, I have all the payables for Home Depot related to merchandise, as well as physical inventory and reconciliation of physical inventories.
Kaushik Maladi with IBM. I'm part of our global services team focusing on blockchain technology to help transform our clients. And fortunate enough here to spend the last, about a year or so with Home Depot in this journey. Just to lay a little bit of background and foundation, maybe I'm sure everybody knows Home Depot. We all have returned products to you.
Based on our shrink numbers, that's true.
So lay the stage and then we can take it from there.
Sure. So the way that Kaushik and I ended up working together, I was actually in a conversation with IBM talking about RPA. So coincidentally, the way that you guys are mentioning it, yes, RPA is not necessarily the silver bullet, but definitely has a lot of advantages. And so we're just in a room with about 6 or 7 of us just talking about RPA, and then they mention, oh yeah, by the way, we've also got this thing called blockchain. So within my organization, we pay out millions of payments a year. There are thousands of vendors, and we get 98% of them I don't even touch, right? All of it goes through automation. I don't even touch it, but the other 2%, when you're talking about $75 billion of payments, 2% is still quite a chunk of change. And so dealing with all those disputes, the issues come up. They say that they shipped one thing, we say that we received something else. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't in the room when they unpacked it, nor was I in the room when they shipped it. So I have to take the word of my operations team that tells me, this is exactly what we received, you shouldn't pay for anything else. The vendor says, well, wait a minute, I shipped you 100 pieces, you said you only received 70. While they weren't in the room either, they will believe their team and they will say that they received 100. We go on and on about this, and we don't really start resolving this issue until we reach terms. So you're already 60 days into the process before you're even talking about getting anything resolved. The issue is visibility, right? If I say that we received 7 or 70 and you say you shipped 100, well, I'm assuming there's another truck coming. So I'm just waiting for the 60 days, waiting for that next truck that never comes. And now the clock starts ticking. Once we basically come to the conclusion that neither of us think the other one is right, we then get salespeople involved, we get merchants involved, we try to resolve this as best we can. And usually somebody says, okay, we're going to pay you for 15 of them, or we're not going to pay you for any of them because these metrics over here tell us that you're not doing something right. But we have no idea if that exact shipment was part of the reason why your metrics are so bad. But we're using outside information to try to figure out the best we can, what do we owe? And none of that is really helping us get to the root cause of what the issues are. And so enter IBM and blockchain. Blockchain, if you have good data, you can use that data to try to figure better answers to what's happening with your inventory. And so that's what we're using blockchain for, and we expect to expand it well beyond that. But right now, with our pilot, we're using it to determine different touches within our supply chain to try to understand exactly where inventory is getting lost. And I'll call your attention to either of the slides, but our ability to see information is good. Our ability to share information with blockchain becomes the paramount reason why you would use blockchain versus developing a database or something like that. Because internally you can do all you want, but if they still believe that they shipped 100, then you're still at square zero as far as trying to figure out what's going on. Let me explain to you a little bit what blockchain is, or maybe Kaushik can help with that as well. But all blockchain is just the ability to share a ledger. So if you look to the blue diagram, that's the way we do business today, right? There's a transportation company, there's a manufacturer, there's a company with the vendor, and then Home Depot. All of us are talking back and forth, but none of us are really seeing the big picture. What happens with blockchain is you're sending information to blockchain, the vendor's sending information, the carrier's sending information, we're sending information. All of that information gets put into the cloud. Everybody sees that information at the exact same time. The other good thing about that is you all have one version of the truth. It is immutable. You cannot change what's in blockchain. I tell Kaushik, this is my analogy, is that blockchain is like Vegas. What happens in blockchain stays in blockchain. So there is no administrator for blockchain. There is no person that's going to go in and change anything. You can't, because you have the same version that I have. My person can't go in and change all of them. So you also have to be very careful about your data that goes into blockchain, because if it's bad data, you then have to fix it. But if you put something in that's bad, it's not like going in and fixing that one. You now have to create a new block to change the issue that you had in the first place. But what it does is it grants you the ability to understand, did that vendor send me all 100 pieces? And they believe they sent me all 100 pieces, and I only received in 70. And now I see within 2 days instead of 60 when I actually have the ability to start making change to that particular transaction. So this is a simple model of what it is the Home Depot is doing right now. So a lot of the issues that we had were within our inbound freight consolidator. Our inbound freight consolidator takes smaller vendors that still ship quite a bit of volume, but they ship it in less than truckload quantities per distribution center. And so what they do is ship in all of the distribution center's product into one facility. Within that one facility, we then break it out and ship it out to the other 18 RDCs that we have in our organization. RDC stands for Rapid Deployment Center. But there's a lot of movement that happens where Home Depot doesn't actually record any financial transactions for any of that inventory. Finance doesn't actually see anything within our financial systems until the very far right side of that page. All the other touches that are happening within our supply chain, but don't ultimately happen within our financial systems. And so all of these touches potentially could change what the issue is related to what the vendor is seeing versus what we're seeing. And so what we're able to do is take the supply chain information and we're making these matches. So we'll start from left to right. So the vendor is going to ship product to us. Well, they put badging on every single pallet, and they put this called UCC 128, fairly standard. And within that UCC 128, they put the ASN information, they put PO information, they put the SKUs, they put the quantities. All that information is sent to us. And from there, they scan every single one of those and they send that information to blockchain. Every arrow you see going up to that cloud is a transmission of information to blockchain. That product is shipped to Home Depot's IFC, or Inbound Freight Consolidator. We scan every single one of those pallets off the truck. So now all of a sudden we have a pallet level audit that we know about the day that it is shipped versus waiting 60 days later. So now I know every single pallet that they shipped, and I can determine whether or not what they said they shipped is what I said I received. We then take that product across the floor of the IFC and we put it to the truck that it's going to ship out on. We then scan it again. Now I've got another touch that I send to blockchain that says I've got all of these scans that are happening and I'm able to reconcile, did anything happen within my building that I might have misplaced or moved a pallet to the wrong lane or whatever. And I can see all of that come across the floor as well. Then I create an ASN to the final distribution center. That ASN allows us the ability to know what the RDC is expecting to ship. I should then be able to match up all my UCC 128s against the ASN and have another touch point within blockchain. Now I know whether or not I've misrepresented the product that I'm shipping to the RDC. And then the final RDC has a key rec or a goods receipt, and I'm able to match up all of the inventory, and they do it at a carton level, so now I've lost the visibility to specific pallets, but working with IBM, we're developing a rebuild of those pallets to determine whether or not I'm actually missing a whole pallet or if it's individual pieces that I'm missing. There are two different conversations that happen there. If I'm missing an entire pallet, but I can see that I received it, I immediately am able to pay that, and I no longer have a dispute. The first vendor that we've actually run through this process, we've seen a reduction in disputes year over year of 65%, which is pretty significant.
What is interesting to me, the conversation is, I don't know if it seems that you talked more supply chain than finance in that conversation, right? And I think that when we started the discussion, we felt that many of the, I'll say, ills of the system kind of fell in your lap, right? In going through this journey, they don't necessarily see the ills that they create, right? They're going to say, hey, I'm doing my job, I'm scanning it in. How did that conversation go? Was that a conversation at all?
Oh, absolutely. This doesn't work without partnership. First of all, with the vendor, right? Obviously, the vendor's got to be involved, or the carriers have to be involved. But the biggest hurdles that you potentially will have with implementing something like this, you're touching a lot of different groups. So I have to get buy-in from my supply chain group. I have to get buy-in from my operations group. And I have to get buy-in from my merchant group in order for this to be successful. Well, the merchants are very on board. What, you're going to solve a problem with me that I have with a vendor? I'm all in. So I told the merchant when I started this process, my goal is to get you out of my business. Merchant doesn't need to be concentrating on payments. They need to be concentrating on innovative product at the lowest cost, and it's going to be in stock on the shelf. As far as supply chain is concerned, that was a bit of a harder sell, but still they're dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with as far as issues with the vendors. So the fact that we're able to show them the movement of the inventory, we're able to show them where the breakdowns are happening, and they're able to use that information to improve their operations, we were able to get over that hurdle as well. And then the final one was with the vendor. And the vendor, they want to get paid, so it's not a hard conversation there either, but there were concerns around technology. And so those are some of the things where partnering with IBM, it definitely helps because they can work with the vendor, or they can work with our technology teams to make sure that that information gets in at a relatively painless clip. But it is all about making sure that you're selling it via partnership so that everybody's on board. You can definitely not do this in a vacuum because blockchain, we're trying to solve one problem, but if you can see beyond what it is that we're doing here, if you get all the vendors on board, you can actually create inventory forecasting. You actually know where your inventory is from the minute the PO is cut and determine whether or not you've got issues or not. If you pull in manufacturers, now all of a sudden you know about raw materials and you can actually pull those in. If you pull in competitors, you can actually see demand that potentially, I mean, depending on how much information you want to share, but at the end of the day, you're all using the same thing. If we brought in an Ace Hardware or a Lowe's, that's not something that would be unheard of. You would obviously, and the great thing about blockchain is this is a private blockchain, and so all the information is segregated to the point where you could share information that everybody would deem useful and not confidential, or you can keep all of the information separate, but you're still operating on one platform that everybody is using to try to figure all that out.
And I think just in that journey, there was like a point of time where I know we all got the question saying, okay, this looks like a big database. What's the point here, right? But I think the business consensus, if you would call it, with all the parties, whether it's suppliers or even within your own organization, having so many different people, right? I think that was a kind of aha moment for people to say it's not only just sharing the data, it's adjudicating the data and the outcome. So for example, you said, if it's a pallet, I know what to do, missing. So then there's no reason for the dispute to be raised, right? I mean, is that kind of where you guys saw a little bit of the value coming out?
Yeah, I think the value comes from, first of all, the value in making sure that we're paying. I mean, we want to pay for everything that we receive, right? I'm not trying to short anybody. The fact of the matter is I'm using the data that I have, and the fact that I can improve the data to help me make payments more accurately, that's where I see this being a value. I also see it being a value in that I've got a team of folks here in Atlanta and in India that are all working towards solving these disputes. If I can repurpose them to actually do something that is more analytical, less process, that's what I want to be able to do, and be able to help merchants with decisions on how things are being done there, being able to help my supply chain team. Not having to go back and forth on phone calls with a vendor trying to determine whether or not we ship 30 pieces or they ship 30 pieces or they ship 20 pieces. Being able to repurpose a good labor force to actually do things that are going to be advancing rather than just looking backwards instead of looking forward.
I think one thing that you just said just struck a chord in the sense, I know one of the takeaways from yesterday was, what would you do different, right? And talking about the workforce, they see this as an exciting adventure, they saw this as an additional task. Was it kind of, hey, I can think outside the box? Because sometimes IBM is as big as any company and we get into some institutional malaise. So how did that, was it an adventure for them? What are your thoughts around that?
My entire team, all of them want to be attached to this. They see the value in the fact that they can get things solved quickly or solved without the vendor being involved. And for what it's worth, blockchain's kind of cool. But when
That's
you hear
okay.
But when you hear the word blockchain, it also kind of helps paint the picture that it's more useful than just cryptocurrency. It's not just about Bitcoin. It's about solving real problems, adding visibility. We're combining AP and AR together. It's one ledger. It's a shared ledger that we're able to see everything at the same time. And you're not trying to solve somebody else's AR problem while we're trying to solve our AP problem. You're actually doing it together.
I think one of the things that we consciously felt was important was to get all the stakeholders on board, specifically our suppliers. And when we start these networks, that is one of the things everyone's saying, oh my God, I need to bring so many people on. Is this, A, is it what they will want to welcome? And B, is it a lot of work? I think the second part is true to some extent. It's always going to be work to bring people on board. But was it a hard sell? Was it like, you need to do this? Or was it like, hey, it's something, let's try it out? Because what I find interesting is you did put on the table to kind of expose your supply chain information out, right? I mean, that's something that is maintained a little bit private before. Did that help? Did that kind of give them a vision saying it's a different kind of partnership? How did that conversation go?
I think it definitely helped. I mean, if you think about what you're trying to solve, you're going to have to own up to what it is you received anyway, right? So, I mean, your payment is telling you what you received. Allowing visibility into the different spots within supply chain, I think only add to the ability for us to maintain a better relationship with the vendor. There's no secret here. We're trying to come to the same conclusion and trying to solve the same problem. So I think it was something that we had to discuss. I don't think that that's something that you just automatically do, but at the end of the day, there's nothing confidential about the relationship that we've got. No, it's confidential beyond the relationship, but within the relationship, there's nothing confidential about that information. It's their product that we're trying to receive.
And it could help build a different kind of bridge, right? Because I think one of the things that I know when I started this journey, we talked a lot about data consensus, but more and more as I see the journey, it's process integration across enterprises.
Yep.
Right?
And I think you had actually asked the question about how hard is it to get all these people on board. Well, a lot of the data that we're able to use comes from the EDI feeds that we get today anyway. And I'm sure a lot of you have EDI set up. Well, that information is very valuable, and there's probably a lot more information in your EDI feed than you're used to, or that you're used to seeing if you're in finance. But you see ACC 128 is something that never gets fed to finance, but it's in the EDI feed. The ASN information doesn't get fed to finance, but it's in the EDI feed. All of those pieces are there. We can actually develop it on our own. That's not something we've done yet, but that it's something that is on our roadmap to fix this, so that we can start onboarding very, very quickly. And now it's all of a sudden a partner with us, we've got a tool ready for you to use, versus partner with us, you need to send us some information. But we're trying to use the information that the vendor is already sharing with us. That's not to say that down the road we wouldn't need additional information, or they might have ideas on how to make this better, and it's going to require some additional input from them. But right now, we're trying to solve that problem to get them on board to this model very, very quickly. We're anticipating, hopefully, we have 5 vendors on board so far, and we're hoping to have probably 25 in a year's time, and then we're hoping to roll out very, 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 very quickly.
Yeah, so this is kind of an enterprise platform. And I think the innovation that came about would spark interest in different use cases, like you said, right? I mean, one of the things that I think is the paradigm shift. We are saying we are causing the root of the problem rather than we are solving the root of the problem, then saying, make me see the problem faster because I'll get the invoice in faster, or I'll make sure my master data is right? And I think that's becoming a little bit more apparent in the conversations you're having internally and externally, right?
Correct. We're actually starting to work with our IT team. Before, we're using IBM as the technology resource, and now our IT team is starting to sniff what it is that we're doing and trying to understand how can we get on board, what are the other use cases that we can use. If you think about compliance, vendor compliance is something that just screams blockchain. But being able to identify that they are not fulfilling the POs or not fulfilling on time or things like that, whereas today we send the fines out or we send the fees out and they'll argue with us as to whether or not that's actually true or not, whereas in blockchain, they actually have to acknowledge that they haven't shipped what they expected to ship. They're actually having to acknowledge that they aren't shipping it on time. And those are things that will make us all better because we all understand the issues at hand as to if it's a raw materials issue, if it's just a production issue, if it's simply a transportation issue. But we can fix all of those things, and having visibility across the board helps out tremendously on how you could get those things solved.